Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our wrestling podcast. We are available on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Soundcloud, YouTube, and iHeart Radio. Now, without further ado, our wrestling podcast is proud to bring to you the legacy of the British Bulldog.
Of Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, came to an end. He was just 39 years old. Davey Boy Smith grew up in Manchester, England. His professional wrestling career began at the tender age of 15. Befriended by the legendary Hart family, Davey made his way to North America. A personal protege of wrestling legend Stu Hart, Davey officially became a member of the Hart family when he married Stu's daughter, Diana. Inside the ring, the British Bulldog achieved international stardom. Outside the ropes, Davey Boy Smith struggled with personal issues that cut his career short. His two children survive him, Harry, 16, and Georgia, 14. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Harry, Georgia, and the Smith and Hart families.
Welcome to the O.W.P. This is our wrestling podcast. This is Dave along with Jess.
Hi, David.
And Craig.
Hey, David.
Bringing you our perspective on the world of professional wrestling. No inside sources, no ties to the industry, just stories from the diehards, sharing opinions with you. And now on to our topic today, the legacy of the British Bulldog. Hit us up on Instagram at O.W.P 2019 and find the very easy link called Linktree, and you can find us just about anywhere at Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Hey guys, how you doing?
We're good. And I'm glad you said that, Dave, because we're getting bigger now. We're on all these different things, and I want to assure our audience that I am the same humble man. Hang on for a second, guys. When you clean my fucking blinds, make sure you get the top, because I saw okay. I'm sorry, guys. Go ahead. Anyway, so I'm still pretty humble. Sorry. Sorry, you guys didn't hear that.
That's fantastic. Craig, how you doing, bud?
Doing well. Live from Knoxville, Tennessee.
Live from Knoxville. That sounds gangster, bro. Seriously. You know,
gangster.
I got to tell you, Craig, since we did our first recording with you, it was a lot of fun, and I think we're going to find a lot more interesting dynamic with the three of us, and a lot of time the four of us when Cuz can get on, and we know Cuz is an every other week kind of guy. He's got a lot of mixing to do for us, a lot of editing to do, and we appreciate that. But I got to tell you, Craig, as soon as you came on, the first thing that we thought about, because of your background, is it's about time to do a bio on the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith. Can you tell the audience of 5 people why that's important?
David.
Whoa, watch out.
I'm from England, and I came to America in 1983. So,
oh my gosh,
in a strange way, my being an immigrant kind of paralleled with the rise of the Bulldogs, and it was my connection to kind of home. Davey Boy Smith, born David Smith, was actually born in Lancashire, and although both my parents were born and raised in Liverpool, England, I spent my first 8 years in England in Lancashire, in Wigan, which is a strange kind of hotbed town, apparently, for British wrestling. So we're from the same hometown and general area. And as a little English British boy far from home, I always kind of connected to Davey Boy Smith, to the point where when us 3 people talking right here used to beat each other up in living rooms and makeshift rings outdoors on carpet mats, my nickname was the British Bulldog. And I came out to his music. So I have an affinity that I'll always have for Davey Boy. And I can't thank you enough for this topic and for coming on and including me.
Oh, we're totally stoked to have it. And by the way, Craig Kurgan was the biggest double crosser in OWF history.
Yes.
We all know this. It's not even a question. So fantastic stuff. We had so much fun back in those days. Just to give you guys some ideas, we actually built a 19 by 19 ring more than once, I think. Even got to the point where we were so dedicated to have 2 camera angles at one moment. Pretty phenomenal stuff. We still have some of it on DVD somewhere. It's buried in my storage at the moment, but someday we'll have to post that on YouTube probably, right, guys? And kind of show some of those highlights. Maybe
or
not.
Or
not. That'll get some hits.
And I think
just don't post any of my matches. Let's make sure we're clear on that.
To Craig's story, it's funny. Just before we get rolling on this, like pro wrestling is really about stereotypes. It always kind of has been, and we've talked about things in the past that have gone south. When you hammer on stereotypes, it could be offensive at times. But really why pro wrestling does that is they want to paint in broad strokes, because it's always about trying to get the casual audience. Vince has proved time and time again that when you get the casual audience, that's when you get your boom periods. That's when you can get the biggest influx of viewership, which means higher attendance, higher merchandise, everything. And Craig is living proof that when they came to WWF, they wore, the Union Jacks, right? They were huge billboards, and we'll get into that. But like, that attracts. So not only is Vince trying to introduce something to the American audience, but people who are from England will see the British Bulldogs, and they're repping the country's flag, and they're repping, and so you draw to it. So casual fans will be like, oh, I'm from there, and in hopes that it will trigger something. And I think that's kind of like sort of the story about Davey Boy, in the sense of like, that's how he kind of got started. He went to the WWF machine once he got to the big time, and they slapped a big label on him. He's like a billboard, and it just kind of grew from there. So to me, it's interesting when Craig tells his story, because that's the whole point of that to a certain extent. He came to America, but yet when he saw them on TV, he was like, oh, at least that reminds me of home. And that's kind of the point sometimes when it's done right in pro wrestling about stereotypes. It sort of makes people feel a certain way, and you start following that person. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt it.
100%. No, and maybe that he kept getting kind of chances throughout kind of his career, and I think the more you dive in with him in his history, he'd always been referred to as kind of the Hulk Hogan of Britain or England, and that's what the hope was, and how Vince wanted him to crack open kind of new markets, and he was always the go-to, and I think only lost once overseas at some point. So yeah, I'm living proof of that kind of affinity and what they were looking for. I imagine if I was from Finland, I'm sure it'd be a huge Ludwig Borgamark, and we'd be talking. But I just happened to be God Save the Queen.
Fantastic. Well, let's just jump right into it. We got the early life. Smith was born in Goulburn. Did I say that right, Craig?
So no. I have no idea. It's in the same town of Wigan. So like Goulburn, I think would be like the county. So
sure. He grew up with his father Sid, mother Joyce, his brother Terrence, and sisters Joanne and Tracy. Joyce was the sister of Bill Billington, father of Tom Billington, also known as the Dynamite Kid, who was Smith's frequent tag team partner. I guess Smith also had some partial Italian ancestry. I don't know why that matters, but we'll jump right into the wrestling career. He actually started in 1978. To give you some perspective, I was 1 year old at that moment.
Yeah, me too.
It's crazy stuff. He started competing on ITV's World of Sport when he was only 15 years old. How's that even legal? Wrestling under the name Young David with his slightly older cousin, the Dynamite Kid, Tim Billington.
I think it's so amazing that they were linked that young, those two.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, that's where they started together, And we'll talk about the departure later, but I'm sure it was absolutely heartbreaking on both sides. But they were mentored by Billington's friend Alan Dennison, and in '79 they appeared to have won the British welterweight championship from Jim Breaks, only for the win to be disallowed by Dennison's distracting breaks, whatever that is.
Yeah, what is that? What does that mean?
I don't know. It's so odd.
Heel chicanery is my best guess.
Yeah, because when you start thinking about that stuff, I'm sure like, oh, I caught you at the last minute and you really didn't win,
So far removed from the twin referees that we would see later. It's like you back here on these regional stuff, they're like, and he pulled the tights. But then like when you get on the main national level on like the 80s, it's like, and then there were twin refs. One was evil. Like, it's so funny how like on different levels wrestling adjusts. Well, if we're talking to a national audience, we got to have twin referees. But like on the small independent circuit, it's like he was doing crazy breaks. He was disrupting them.
Yeah.
British wrestling was so boring. I remember on Saturday afternoons watching it, and it's different. It's like 2 out of 3 falls or whatever. So it's almost like rounds. They would take breaks, And
this is exactly what it was. It was a 1-1 draw, and it challenged him to defeat him for the belt. Yeah,
there
was a
awful.
1-1 draw.
Fucking exciting.
And they weren't even muscular, so they were skinny 15-year-olds. So imagine turning on to BBC Two or whatever on Saturday afternoon and seeing a 15-year-old kid just like have 6 3-minute rounds with Big Daddy, who was there, Hulk Hogan, who's literally, he was 450 pounds and 60 years old when I was 7.
Wow.
It was awful. Sorry for anyone who loves British wrestling.
Well, thank goodness for that. Smith was actually spotted by Bruce Hart, who was scouting talent in the UK, and both he and Dynamite Kid traveled to Canada to wrestle for Stu Hart. So that's kind of where they got started, right? Hart and Roy Wood trained for Smith further in the Dungeon. Everybody knows about the Dungeon. It's infamous at this point. And Smith became a key wrestler in Stampede Wrestling. During this time in Stampede, Smith began a feud with the Dynamite Kid. He won his first world title when he defeated the Dynamite Kid for the Stampede British Commonwealth mid heavyweight title. Well, that's a mouthful.
Naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. No big deal, right? So that's when you're just creating titles. Oh, kind of like what they do now. I'm sorry. Anyway, in '83, Smith debuted in New Japan Pro Wrestling. That's kind of crazy, right? 1983, New Japan Pro Wrestling was kicking off. It was still around. It's still around today. Kind of a staple when you think about it. And he was involved in a 3-way feud with Dynamite Kid and the Cobra, who was George Takano, over the NWA Junior Heavyweight title. So 84, I don't want to read this. God, it's so much bullshit.
Don't read what you don't want to read, David. I will give you that freedom.
I'm telling you. So basically what happened was when all this, after the tournament came down, there was a tournament and all this bullshit, but Smith and Dynamite Kid formed a tag team called the British Bulldogs in 84. They made a shocking move by jumping to New Japan's rival, All Japan Pro Wrestling, just before the start of All Japan's
that was, and the
tournament.
dynamic of that really quick was literally like WCW and WWF back at the time. Like, I know New Japan's so easy to roll off the tongue nowadays because they're back, and I mean, they never left, but they shrunk down, and now their American presence is large again, and just in general their presence is large again. But All Japan was a big deal. That was like a competing like promotion back then. So there's a lot of big stars that came out of All Japan too. We just kind of hear about the New Japan stuff, and that was like a WCW and WWF kind of rival.
But it's interesting because that annual tag tournament in All Japan is where they got noticed by the WWF, and then they started their debut in '84 with the WWF, where, along with Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, they were all brought to WWF after Vince bought out Stampede Wrestling. Because you all know, even though you're wrestling in New Japan and All Japan, you were still kind of with Stampede or you're with your American Federation, but you would get loaned out. So basically, even though they were in those areas at the time, they were all part of Stampede. But Vince, being Vince, he just about bought everything. We all know, if he had bought one more, we would have never had a Monday Night War. But he bought out Stampede, and that means that Bret Hart, Jim Neidhart, and the Bulldogs come to WWF in 1984. They were able to tour both the WWF and All Japan, but eventually McMahon said no. And he gained exclusive rights to the Bulldogs, and they began a long feud with Hart and Neidhart, who was known as the what?
The Hart Foundation. That's their theme song.
I thought you were going to give me some shit-ass answer like you always do.
Fuck, I know, and I should have. I really should have. God, I'm losing it.
You're like, the Rockers was the
I was
answer.
actually into it, and I'm just like, oh, fuck, that's right. He totally set the table for me. And I'd be like, that's right. They were called the Sheep Herders. That's usually what I would do.
The first contest of the evening, one fall with a 20-minute time limit. Introducing in the corner to my right, from Reno, Nevada, he weighs 285 pounds, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And his partner, from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, he weighs 235 pounds, Bret the Hitman Hart. And their opponents in the corner to my left, from Manchester, England, with a combined weight of 475 pounds, the British Bulldog.
This is fantastic. The Bulldogs also feuded with the Dream Team with Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake, because we all know how much Greg Valentine hated that shit.
Well, and real quick too, like I think what I've always seen, it's so interesting the way this happened. You know, Vince Jr. has always been sort of disinterested in tag wrestling. And it show when business slows down, it shows. He's like, just put this guy together and this guy together, and that he makes makeshift tag teams. Or nowadays he puts like, you know, Jericho and Show together, and he calls them Jeri-Show and stupid shit. So like, but back here, like
that's genius.
I don't know if he did this on purpose or if he inadvertently did it, but when he got this talent from Stampede, it really in the early 80s, when the Rocking Wrestling area, when the Vince Jr. era was just starting, that defined their tag division. You had the Hart Foundation, you had the Bulldogs, and then later you would have the Rougeaus and the Killer Bees and the Young Stallions and the Islanders, and Demolition, those core from like 84 to like 90 were like some of the classic fucking tag teams ever. And you hear countless stories in Brett's book and other people's books about how, you know, in house shows, the Bees and the Hearts would just fucking tear the goddamn house down, or the Bulldogs and the Hearts. You know, somebody would say, "Oh, I love your match from Saturday Night's Main Event when you guys fought the Bulldog." And Brett's like, "We had like 50 matches that were house show matches that blew that one away. If you like that one, if you were lucky enough to be in the Civic Center on this date, like we tore the fucking house down." And Vince would commonly use those combinations because Hulk, I got to go on mid card, brother. I need room service. So he would slam the one man gang or Bundy or John Studd in the middle of the card. But the tag matches, like the Hearts and the Bees, or the Hearts and the Rougeaus, or the Hearts and the Bulldogs, or the Bulldogs and fill in the blank, they would always close the shows out and they would hold the crowd there, you know. And it's amazing to me, that purchase that you just talked about ushered in, whether Vince knew it or not, the tag wrestling that we all grew up with and we liked. So to this day, when Vince still shows, like when he doesn't give a shit about tag wrestling, I'm like, how do you not? Like when you had that kind of core. But maybe it was a coincidence when he just bought that talent. It is what it is. I don't know what to do with those guys. Fucking tag them together. Like, and that's fine because it was the best thing he could have done. I just wanted to point that out because that makes me happy knowing that like that the wrestling started from that. Stampede contributed probably indirectly in that way.
Yeah, no, agreed. And that's where all this comes in. Speaking of that talent, that tag talent, they did so well that they actually do end up defeating the Dream Team for the tag team championship at WrestleMania 2. And they held those titles for almost 9 months, feuding with the Dream Team and Volkov and Sheik. Another kind of thrown together situation. But you know,
match of the year, by the way, their Mania 2 match. I know, Craig, you and I would watch that a lot when we were growing up together. Like that was a really good match. Did you? I know you probably watched like the clips of that because none of us got went to closed circuit events.
Tag team champions of the world.
How did you feel about that?
Davey
Was it
Boy
pretty
Smith,
cool
the Dynamite Kid, and their
like
manager Captain Lou? You've done it again, another world championship.
Well, thank you very much, Mean Gene. But I don't. You don't have to praise me so much. That's not important. What's important is that these are the finest gymnastic wrestlers of the modern day era, Gene. That's what it's all about.
All right, gentlemen, that's high praise from a future World Wrestling Federation Hall of Famer, Captain Lou Albano, Davey.
Well, Mean Gene, I don't like to disagree, but the captain brought us to this point.
All right, Dynamite.
Both as wrestlers and Bulldogs.
Okay, right now, gentlemen, let's take a look at the night the title changed hands in Chicago. As part of WrestleMania 2, we're going to pick up the commentary of my colleague, Gorilla Monsoon.
The Hammer taking a big chance here. Probably could have had a 3 count. Davey Boy perched up on that second rope. What's he thinking about?
I think my first wrestling pay-per-view I ever remember, I think, was WrestleMania 2, and one kid at the apartment complex that I lived got it, and I was in America. I was in the U.S. at that time, and the only reason I remember it is back in that day they had intermissions. So they had like a big intermission card in the middle of the screen that it just went to black with a title card for 15 minutes. Between probably Chicago and New York.
That, yeah, they did that all the way up to 90 is when they stopped the intermissions.
That's so silly. Finally someone said, maybe we shouldn't actually stop the TV feed. Like we shouldn't pretend that people go out and get popcorn in their houses. But I remember kind
Jiffy
of that
Pop
distinctly. So, but looking back, I watched the kind of stuff back the last couple of days and seeing Ozzy Osbourne like jump around the ring
my God,
and be announced, and yeah, And They Got Music
Fantastic.
and Dream Team was already in the ring. So it was it was good. I mean, and again, I think it starts a string of kind of bad timing for Davey sometimes in his career, but who knows how long they would have had it. I think Dynamite his back was already trashed at that point, and there was controversy of when they gave up those belts after they got him. He just couldn't work, I don't think. He was just in so much pain they had to drop him. So I don't know how long they were gonna have them, but I think they didn't have it long, right? 9 months is a long time, but back then.
Did you see Davey Boy Smith's body snap over on that double move?
Davis wanting Dynamite to get on the apron. He can't. Jimmy Hart hit him with a megaphone earlier on. What is this?
Here it is. The Hart clothesline. No.
Yeah,
It wasn't long then. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and then the Hearts would eventually beat them for it, and in favor of a Vince storyline. Danny Davis was turning into the heel ref, and he played into that. He was the ref in that match, and so that the Bulldogs were cheated out, so they didn't get beat cleanly or anything like that. But yeah, like
Sure.
I think it's when we think back of the British Bulldogs as a tag team, a lot of us are like, well, they're fucking one of the greatest, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but when you go back and look at what titles meant back here, which a title was, you brought value to the company. They put the belt on you because you drew a little bit more or this or that.
Sure.
Like you got a promotion in your company. And like, it really is baffling. I remember growing up learning about wrestling going like, really? They were only tag champions once, the Bulldogs? Like they're talked about in such high regard.
Well, let's be real about it. They lose the titles. They gain a mascot. They start doing work with the Islanders and the Rougeau brothers, and that's where you start to have problems. This is why I didn't come back to them. We all know this. We all know this story. The Bulldogs left the WWF in 1988, due in part to backstage problems between the Bulldogs, specifically, Dynamite and the Rougeau brothers, over a prank that was pulled by, Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig. The Bulldogs, they were pranksters in their own right. They were also kind of dicks in the ring. They destroyed
they were
people.
more. I think they were more hazers. Like they were hazing a lot.
Yeah,
They were
hazers and pranksters. And this led to a lot of confrontations that culminated Jacques Rougeau knocking out 4 of Dynamite Kid's teeth with a fist filled full of a roll of quarters. I can't even get it out. Though
It's
there
so
are various,
old school.
there's various accounts of the situation and the incident. Many suggest that Billington drew first blood by bullying Rougeau, among many others, including Honky Tonk Man, who Dynamite actually brought to tears in Miami about it.
And it sort of ended them abruptly. They were almost on their way out anyway, the Bulldogs, and we're here talking about Davey, and this just leaves Davey like in this odd scenario. He came in as part of the acquisition of Stampede Wrestling, and he came in knowing Brett and Dynamite and Jim Neidhart, and it's just kind of like now this is happening, and he's. Dynamite's like, we're leaving. He's like, all right. Like, he just kind of, he went with them. I think Davey Boy was always kind of the more naive one. He just kind of said, all right, I'll go with you guys if you want to go. And that's what ended up happening, I think, in this point where Dynamite's like, fuck it, I'm gone. I'm done. Like, Davey Boy's like, I'll go with you. That's fine.
And I think there's a point where that does happen, and there's points later where it doesn't. I mean, Davey was young at the time, and eventually I think Davey smartens up. We'll talk about that shortly, right? So after leaving the WWF, they returned to Stampede, hoping to revive the promotion, but they were really unsuccessful. In '89, it was a decision made to split up the Bulldogs, but the problem was they were still working with All Japan, and they were promoting the Bulldogs as a tag team, so it's quite confusing. So in '89, Smith with other wrestlers like Chris Benoit, Ross Hart, Jason the Terrible, they were involved in a crazy auto accident, and Smith wasn't wearing a seatbelt at the time. He needed 135 stitches after slamming his head through a windshield and being thrown 25 feet onto the pavement. I don't even know how he survived that,
until we did the research for this episode. I didn't even know that happened.
It's crazy. It's unbelievable
did you,
stuff.
Craig? I had no idea that even happened.
No, and then I was looking at stuff today. Like I wonder that's whether because his forehead always it has a bit of a mangled kind of part on it, and I never know whether that was from years of blading and that kind of history, or whether that's from just 125 stitches right in his head. So,
and according to this source, Meltzer recorded that in 2004. Dave Meltzer, which I have issues with. Not everybody does, but I do. But I tend to believe that. I don't think Meltzer would would fib on that one, right? So he recovered though, and the Bulldogs continued teaming in All Japan against teams like Joe and Dean Malenko, Kente Kobayashi, Tayoshi Kokichi, and the Nasty Boys. Personal problems began to surface between Smith and Billington though, and then Smith left All Japan to come back to the WWF as a singles wrestler.
Best decision he made.
I
hate to say, man, Dynamite was swirling the drain, right? And I think Smith at that point, he was the bigger guy, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
How many times, you know, I and it's funny, Liz and I were watching Fighting with My Family. We watched it for the first time last night, and it was about the Paige story, right? So, and her brother was like the technical, he was really good technically, but she got chosen because she had the goth kind of look and she was different or whatever. And the whole, you know, struggle between the two was like, he's like, you're stealing my dream. I'm the one that's super good at this and really good, and you're just okay. And it was just more of like, that is the whole story about like a lot of tag team splits that we see, you know, like Dynamite or Benoit we liked for a long time, right? And Benoit's so good, but like that's not what they look for, you know. Dynamite was so good. How many people said they were influenced? Benoit, one of them, they were influenced by the way Dynamite moved and the way he wrestled. And, you know, he gave small guys hope, you know, and saw that. But the big promotions they were looking for the Davey Boys, right? The big broad guys. And Davey wasn't even overly tall, but he was broad, very muscular.
He was 5'11".
Yeah, you know, I mean, but he was so super wide and legitimately probably walked around at 260, 265 of all muscle. And just like, you know, he had the look and you know, for a while when he came back, he got the braids in his hair and he wore, you know, the flag everywhere on him. He's like a massive billboard. And like, that's what people want. So it was so smart for him to not follow Dynamite, because Dynamite, you know, he had problems anyway, demons, but he stuck around the promotions that he could use his, you know, apply his trade at. Where Japan, they love the talent that you can offer. Are you good technically? Where Bulldog's like, fuck it, I'm going back to America and I'm going to go to WWF where I will probably have a better chance, because Vince loves the big boys. He loves the strength.
And he wasn't even a big boy standing on the rope. He was the big boy doing 80% of the work in the ring, because Dynamite just simply couldn't anymore. Yeah. So it's like, not only was he the big man, he was doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And the smartest thing he ever did is he's the one he trademarked British Bulldog, which I think was another cause of strife between him and Dynamite towards the end. But
big time,
if he didn't do that before he jumped, like, it's one of those things. He's always, as Jess was saying, he seemed to kind of just be the side guy and do whatever kind of the more strong-headed guy was, whether that was Bret Hart or Dynamite. But this was the moment that he finally, I think, stepped out and said, no, I think it's best. Everyone warned me about hanging with Dynamite and his reputation of being a prankster. I don't think that ever left Davey Boy, but I think he certainly didn't start out as being kind of a bitter and as mean and as cruel as Dynamite was with the pranks and what they did and the backstage issues.
And you know,
so
it was kind of going along.
You know, his wife Diana was the one who was like, "You better patent the British Bulldog, I swear to God." Like, and he's like, "Okay, fuck, okay." Like, I'm not saying he's not smart enough on his own, but I feel her making the executive call as the family leader, just going like, "You seriously need to fucking like copyright that shit so we could take it and make more money with it." Okay, fucking calm down. Like, you know, it's like,
all right,
okay,
I just did it. Do I do an R or a TM? What do I do? Do I pick is it registered a trademark? I don't know, Diana.
Who do I call?
That's why you're the small one. I need you. Fuck, I'm sorry.
So he actually returned to the live event on the 6th of October. He defeated Haku, which we all know Haku would kill everybody with one handshake, but you know, it's kayfabe, folks. Smith made his televised in-ring return on the 27th of October on an episode of Superstars. He defeated the Brooklyn Brawler. Everybody's, you know, picking ons. And then over the next 2 years, he was basically a mid-carder, feuding with the likes of the Warlord and Mr. Perfect, things like that. But he was a pop
7 years.
Yeah,
I did.
And honestly, their WrestleMania 7 match, I hate to say this, like, but like it's decent in the sense of like, you really saw, and we're going to get into it later, that Vince was thinking in his head, I might be able to do something with this guy. And by that, I mean like on a championship level. Like I got to test this guy. You know, like I said, he had the look and everything. And like, you go back and watch the WrestleMania 7 match, as simple as it was, when he power slammed the massive Warlord, like that place went nuts. They were wanting to cheer for him. Again, he had the billboard factor going for him. He just, the braids, I think he came down with a dog at this point. And like, he was just like, it's everybody that Vince wanted. It's every quality Vince wanted. And like, I fondly remember that. And it's odd to say that about a Warlord match, but like, it was just like that. I remember when he first came back in like 1991, and I was like, I felt even as a fan, like they're trying to prime me for him. Like, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Come on, he's going to go up. He's got those fingers separated, Brain. Take a look at it.
Yes, but he's got so much pressure in those arms and in his wrist. I'm surprised he even got up this far.
Oh, look at him fighting here.
He's going to break it. It looks like he's coming out of it.
British Bulldog giving it everything he's got here.
Come on, Slickster, you got to get your man motivated. Get him going. Pound on that mat. Let him hit you.
Oh, Davey Boy broke it.
I don't believe it. Yeah, I do. It's all that hole he's got on him.
Right up over the top. Oh, he's got it up. You said it couldn't be done.
I can't believe it.
They're going crazy. Oh, slam.
He's got it. He got it.
And can we talk about the braids? Was there ever a match where he didn't poke his own eye out with those braids?
Oh no! Oh
Why
no!
would, like,
There was one in WCW. I know we're going to get to that point when he was in WCW later. It was against Vader. I think he did something and he whipped his eye. And for the rest of the match, you see him squinting out of one eye. Like he was like, fuck, like, oh, like he just, the bead whacked him right in the eyeball.
Oh, jeez. Well, some of that part of that fandom that you guys are talking about, he had a huge fan base in the United Kingdom because the WWE actually had ratings hits on Sky Sports, which is a British subscription television sports channel operated by satellite pay TV, Sky, and it's a division of Comcast. So they actually were able to see the British Bulldog through the WWF. So when he did go overseas and things, like, he was a huge sensation. People knew Davey Boy right away. So that, I think some of that syndication overseas through Sky Sports is super important to Davey's rise over like the next decade. Just something to think about.
That's an important part of like the value that Vince saw in him. When I told, just said a few seconds ago that I felt like Vince was priming him. It was because Vince smelt the overseas money, and he's just like, okay, like, yeah, I have national stars like Hulk and Macho and all that, but I want a guy that is theirs. So when he goes over there, I don't need Hulk. I don't need Macho. I have him. And that was like, really, again, we say what we want to say about Vince, right? But the fucking guy, like, just thought at every angle, how do I make my brand the best everywhere?
Well, think about it like this. I mean, he actually, like, to your point, he goes on to Supercards like UK Rampage, and he defeats the Berserker. The Berserker was the fucking boringest guy I ever saw on Saturday morning.
Isn't that the Hulk effect though, right? Like, I mean,
how many house shows
Hulk, and then to your point, Dave, like, it's like he was the Hulk overseas. Like, you didn't care. Oh, Hogan's on the card. Oh, who's he fighting? He's fighting Dr. David Schultz. I don't care about him, but Hulk's on, and it's like, that's a star power, right? Like, that's like, he puts him against a Berserker.
The difference is it's at London Arena in 91, and the Battle Royal at Albert Hall. Smith wins a 20-man Battle Royal by eliminating Typhoon. Like, so what? Right. But still, it's because it's Davey Boy. And then he enters as the first man in the 92 Royal Rumble. He eliminated DiBiase, Sags, and Haku before being eliminated by the future champion of that year, Ric Flair, by winning that Royal Rumble.
Great stuff, Davey. The emotion here is absolutely overwhelming. Davey Boy, the British Bulldog, you pulled it off. That's tremendous.
Wait a minute! What's this? Earthquake's in the ring!
This is awful!
Jimmy Hart's in the ring!
This is Davey Boy's moment of glory in front of his own people, his own island! That's a terrible travesty!
In front of all his people! It's good! What a short bit of success he had!
That's terrible! This should never, ever be allowed! The referees, they've got to bring somebody else in or do something about this!
No, it's over!
Davey Boy, get up, Davey, get up!
Let's Let's get some assistance.
Well, another reason why that Rumble is still to this day considered one of, if not the best Rumble, if not one of the best Rumbles, is because there was a lot of questions. There were so many people in that Rumble where, this year was like
who could win it?
Yeah, this year was a pick 'em, right? It's more exciting when you really can't see them telegraphing who's going to win. It could have been anybody. And Davey was being primed for like a year before. Could he have won it? Yeah. Really, as fans, I remember us thinking like a lot of this stuff could happen. Yeah, Flair's there, Hulk's there, Savage in it, but Davey, no one talks about him that much in the top tier because he hadn't been there yet. And now I'm like, this could happen. Obviously when you look back, you're like, well, of course, but you didn't really know. That was the fun part about the 92 Rumble was I remember Davey being in there and us in my living room watching and being like, he could fucking win this. He could do it.
Smith again headlined the WWF European Tours at Rampage, winning the 15-man Battle Royal by eliminating the Mountie in Munchen, Germany on the
another tough opponent
14th of April. Yeah, fantastic. And then defeated IRS in England on April 9th, right? Then we get into the Intercontinental Championship run, right? Obviously, because of all the syndication we're talking about, all this stuff overseas where, wherever Davey's at, he's getting the Hogan ovation. This is the best way I can describe it, right? He's getting those kind of pops. And Vince is certainly taking notice at this point. So they decided to hold their annual SummerSlam pay-per-view in Wembley Stadium in London. This show was main evented by Smith, who was led by Lennox Lewis and Bret Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. I want that to sink in for a second. There is a world title match on the line at SummerSlam, right? It's not the main event because it's in London. And it's the British Bulldog.
This was also the first time in WWF history, besides a house show where they did it all the time. But a televised pay-per-view that the world champion didn't go on last. That was kind of, for good or bad, it became a trend I didn't care for later. But that's how, to Dave's point, that's how big Bulldog was. Craig, I don't know if you were there, Dave, but I know Craig and I, Nathan was there. We watched this at Joe's house on pay-per-view.
Unbelievable intestinal fortitude on the part of both participants. Sunset flip. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of this bout and new Intercontinental Champion, the British Bulldog. Can't believe it! One of the greatest wrestling matches of all time has just taken place here at SummerSlam. The new Intercontinental Champion, the British Bulldog.
Oh, wow. No, I wasn't there for that one.
And he did it in
It was
his
so
own
cool.
backyard.
Just you see the shots. It's iconic of just all those kind of people. And man, I don't know what to believe of the story of Brett and how he, he carried everything. And
we've talked about that on prior episodes. Craig just does not believe it. He says it's bullshit. We know that there was a lot of stuff going on in Davey's background. He was struggling a little bit with some demons for sure. But there's no way that, there's a big difference between forgetting the start of something and forgetting the move here and there and blanking out on the entire match. It's these guys are wrestling each other over and over and over.
That when they locked up, Davey leaned in and said, "I fucking forgot everything." I believe that, but I do not believe that after 60 seconds, Davey Boy was not totally settled in. You don't have,
he snapped.
You don't have the best match of 1992 and of his career. But he forgot everything, and Brett's so good, and Brett's very, very good. But he's not gonna come on. Bulldog snapped out of it.
It takes two to tango, my friend.
Bulldog totally carried his end. Brett speaks from bitter juice a lot.
I remember, God rest his soul, Davey, but Brett was like, well, I hadn't talked to Davey all summer, and then I see him, and he says, I've been smoking crack with Neidhart for all summer. So I was like, what? You're just throwing the man under the bus.
Yeah, right.
There's no way you'd be trusted to do 80,000 people.
Yeah, if he was smoking
have
crack
that match
with Neidhart all summer, I think Davey would probably have lost a little weight at that time and looked a little worse for wear. He looked pretty fucking good at SummerSlam 92. You know what I mean?
He did. That wasn't a crack body.
Yeah, right.
That's not typically a crackhead body.
Yeah, I don't think Brett really knows. He had all of his teeth on top of it all. So yeah, Davey Boy looked great.
But I think you guys put that one to bed. But this is where Smith won a title, which is regarded as many people would say the finest of his career. One of the best matches he and definitely Hart too. I mean, it's funny how we talk about all these matches and these great matches, some of the greatest ever, and they I'd say over 50% of the time they involve Bret Hart. I'm sorry, it is true. Smith actually loses this title to Michaels on the 14th of November on a Saturday night's main event, and he was released by the WWF. Him and the Ultimate Warrior were released at this time. They were receiving shipments of human growth hormone from a pharmacy in England, and they were both released.
I wonder who turned the Warrior on to that contact.
Oh, Jesus.
From England. Hey, I know a guy.
Hey,
you do? Yes, I do.
Are you working today?
Yeah. Two things about this moment here is, first of all, to Jess's point about respecting Bret Hart more, I really wish that I would have respected Shawn Michaels less, because in the research for this week, this was the beginning of Shawn Michaels kind of being the roadblock to every Davey Boy kind of victory from like here on out. For some reason,
because I believe he knew it would get to Bret.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, he knew it would get to Bret after a while. I think that's the main reason why Michael did it. It wasn't even like directed at Davey. It was more of just like, this is gonna fuck with Bret because Davey was family, and so Michaels is a dick. Like, he's a huge asshole.
And this is coming so the trial is about to hit. The steroid trial and the fight with the U.S. government's about to hit McMahon in the face. So, of course, this is just bad timing kind of for Davey Boy and anyone big and a bad. Of course, you've got to get rid of him. So it happens in 94. This is the end of 92. The trial itself is 94, I think. But that whole year of 93 is where it's stressing out and coming to a head. So it's just, what are you going to do? Hey, who hasn't ordered steroids online from England?
No,
totally.
I should. Maybe I'll start. Okay. I tell you, I don't know. I mean, shit happens. And by the way, nobody gets nearly as mad at the Major League Baseball Association for steroids as they do for banging on trash cans. But I digress.
Not even that, just on that point, like this. Okay. And I know I'm going to use the F word and people hate it that are wrestling fans. This shit's fake, but yet they penalize wrestlers almost harder sometimes than actual athletes in baseball and basketball who get caught doing it. It's so funny.
Major League Baseball is a prime example.
Fucking
of
so
that.
hard on wrestling for it, and I'm like, it's a movie. Like, I don't like using the fake word, right? But like, it's like stuntmen that are live action heroes. Like, but you're holding them to the same standard that you would,
You don't get on Stallone for that. You don't get on
like
Schwarzenegger
it's crazy. But I mean, it is what it is, and we've all known it's always been an issue, and they still test for it now. But like, it's just sort of, I'm not saying let people go nuts. I wish they would make certain things legal. I've always had that stance, but like because you do what you want to do, but especially in wrestling, it's all about the look, right? And they do it to heal quick. They do it to look good. And if the guys over abuse it, I mean, I'm not saying that the string of deaths that happened from growth hormones, that was from ignorance of the product. That wasn't from like, you got to look good and be a wrestler. I'm not saying kill yourself, be smart about it, have a doctor prescribe it to you. But when you make this shit illegal, people are going to get it from England and then just fucking like consume it in mass quantities. And then they die in their 30s in their sleep or whatever. And it's like, so it's a double-edged sword. Like you blame them. Yes. And you can blame the industry, but also like, well, if you make it illegal and make them ashamed to do it, it's like training, training, that's a terrible word, teaching your kids training. It's just like you tell them no, not to do something, they're going to do it. And like, that's no matter how old you are, if you're in an industry and they're like, don't do that. They're like, I gotta fucking do that. I gotta look good. And that's just,
right. Just don't get caught.
Yeah.
Like it's so sad that those two guys got the brunt of everyone was doing. My goodness.
And here Hogan, the asshole, like left earlier in the year because he fucking knew it was coming down. He's like, I'm retiring to do movies, but it was really to get the fuck out of Dodge so I don't get caught. Like, and everybody knew Hulk looked like shit in the beginning of 92, looked fat and out of shape. And it's like, the smart ones jumped ship quick and left. Macho put a shirt on. And
well,
you know
they
what I
were
mean? Like,
tips.
it's just,
They were fucking. You know, they were
Macho
tips.
put
He
his shirt
did. Like,
up.
yeah, he did. He put a shirt on, and then but Warrior and Davey were like, but if we get it from England, though, it's like, I know.
I wonder. You know, they talk about how Macho wanted to, go behind and start pushing on the, on the microphone and stuff. I don't think that was it. I think they tipped him. They tipped Hogan. Why don't you step away for a while?
Yeah.
And that's nobody's going to admit that. Even Bruce Pritchard can't admit that, but that's what fucking happened. Like, if you can't be a man about it and just tell us,
yeah,
well,
they tipped him off, and Hogan was smart, and he was just like, I'm going to go do a shit movie.
and Macho's like, I'll put a shirt on and a cowboy hat and sit behind a desk for like
so
a
you,
year.
you don't need to test me. Like, yeah, you don't need to test me at all. But yeah, it's just sort of like, it's what happened. And like Craig said, Davey and Warrior got the blunt of it because they were the sort of silly ones that stuck around towards the end going, it's fine. And then, no, it's not fine. Like, I'm fired. Shit.
Do you like my muscles? Do you?
What do you mean I gotta lose to Sean? What the fuck? Like, it's just, it's gonna get worse than that. Then you just dropping the belt.
So let's get on a quick little 2-year push here because Davey Boy goes to ECW for 92 to 93. Goes to All Japan for part of the year 93. Also WCW for a partial year 93.
WCW is super interesting to me because they were commonly the land of, you didn't get treated good in WWF? Well, come on over, Steamboat. We'll put the title on you. Well, come on over, Rude.
There you go.
We'll treat you good, Rude. You know what I mean? So Davey comes over, and I really thought he's going to win the title. How would he not? He's a guy from the other company that they're trying to beat. He's got all that mainstream attention, and he's got foreign appeal. So how Davey's going to win the goddamn title? He never fucking did, but he did leave us with classic fucking Vader matches. And they were all beautiful, all of them.
No, I don't think he is. Whoa! Oh, he went for it. Down on Harley Riggs. Vader. And Riggs just kind of rolls out of the way as this fight continues. Oh, and here's Sid Vicious. Here he is.
Oh! And Sid catches Davey Boy. That's an automatic disqualification.
Colonel Park.
Yeah, he was, and Vader was that heel champion at the time, and he also did some feuds with Vicious, and he kind of forms an alliance with Sting, and it's pretty decent time, but it's so quick. He basically returns to the United Kingdom '94 and wrestles for All-Star Wrestling.
I know we're running short of time, but
weird.
He didn't win one fucking title in WCW, not one.
Yeah, not one.
What the hell are we doing here? You get that's WCW for you. Like, they get him, and I know they were pushing Vader, and that's fine and all, but you get Davey Boy, and they did it really, and I've talked about in past episodes about why Bischoff brought Hogan over there, where after a while when the bloom fell off the rose, they were like, oh, Hulk's not spiking ratings anymore. He's not spiking this, not spiking that. But Bischoff used him for international appeal and just a mainstream name. Whereas WCW, one of the few things they did right in '93, they brought Bulldog over because they wanted to start touring England and overseas and Europe, and they wanted to use Bulldog for that. And they had semi-successful tours because they brought him over for that. So even though he didn't win a title that I joked about, they used him intelligently for once. WCW did before the NWO came. That they used him to try to do that, and so Davey was important for that. How they didn't at least give him a fucking a month run, for God's sakes, was something I don't know. But I don't want to yada yada past that run because he did a lot of good stuff. I mean, Craig and I would always laugh about the bead getting whipped in his eye and all that stuff.
There's a bit of a theory on this. When you look at this run from ECW, All Japan, WCW, and All-Star Wrestling, where he kind of takes over for Big Daddy, who retires from suffering a freaking stroke in '93. This 2-year run is strictly filler for a check before he comes back to his second return in the WWF. I mean, is it not?
But there's also the issue, again, timing in his career of just wrong place, wrong time, or just bad luck. And I don't know how much the altercation and the legal issues people have said, and through his history, he got released because he fought a guy in a bar in '93 with WCW, and he put him in a front face lock, and the guy was in a coma and was sued for $1.5 million or something. But who knows if that actually?
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I was going to say that too. Thank you, Craig, but I didn't know that either until I read the research for this episode. That happened. That was the big disruption in WCW. That's insane to me.
Yeah, which it never really went anywhere, obviously, but Yeah, he actually was. It was an altercation. Apparently the man was making advances towards Davey's wife in the bar. Apparently,
don't.
Yeah,
Right. Actually, he could have saved him $1 million by just saying, "Don't do that."
Instead, he's
yeah. I would have said, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I understand. So but
again, like, and I think this runs kind of throughout. Like, he was part of the Syracuse thing with Sean and just other stuff. It's just always wrong place, wrong time, and who would have known? Maybe they would have given a title.
Or
Maybe
he was a follower, I guess, right? Like I don't mean to be rude, but like, it's funny when we watch the documentary, the Wrestling with Shadows, the Bret Hart one. Craig used to always like make me laugh because that scene where they're all just dicking around, the Hart Foundation, they were heels at the time, and they were dicking around before they had to do an interview. And Bret was the one that walked over and he's like, "Come on, Davey, guys, come on, we're late. Let's go over to the thing." And Craig would always do Davey going, "Oh, you want me to, and it was like just kind of, and I used to always laugh at Craig for doing that impression because that was Davey. He was just innocently trying to be just a fun frat boy. And like, but you know, the authority would come over, like Bret going, "Davey, stop fucking around." I wasn't okay. Like, and he would just go and yeah. But that was always Davey, I think. And I don't know him as a person, obviously, but like, I think that was always Davey. And I think he was innocent to a certain extent. I think he just kind of, like Craig always said, he just trusted certain people. And then, yeah, Syracuse would happen.
This was probably the funnest time for them because this is where, you know, they kind of involve the allied powers, and Bret gets to roll with Owen quite a bit. And Owen Hart is one of the biggest ribbers of all time in any wrestling fashion, right? So, you know, they were just having a blast.
Craig, what's the
Jim's over there probably doing
the thing that
coke
Bulldog
used
to always say about Owen? He'd fucking Owen. How do you say it?
Fucking Owen.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge point, Jess. And I think because you hear people and they talk about the memory of Davey Boy, Diana says it in the retrospective. And I think who else says it? I think Pritchard said it too. Or he was like a big kid. He was fun loving, but a big kid. And I think for better or for worse, if you don't have kind of this, again, I don't know him and you hate talking about, you know, but if you're just a fun loving kid, sometimes you don't make the right decision. I think he had a problem with motivation. He could turn it on when he wanted and have 5-star matches, and then he could stink up the joint. And then maybe that's why he never got to that next level of being a champion. And he needs that like authority figure in his life kind of thing. And he's kind of a ribber and fun loving and never quite that alpha mentality or personality. He was just kind of a guy that adjusted and could turn it on, but in essence, a child almost.
Yeah.
Like, and it makes a lot of sense.
In other words, it's like all the top guys are paranoid to a certain extent, right? I think we talked about that off mic about a certain star. And they're paranoid to a certain extent where they're like, I have to be better than the best. And so I have to do this or I have to do, and they obsess. I'm not saying Davey didn't work hard or work hard for his body or his craft, but Bret, it was paranoid. And Bret was always like, "Come on, fucking guy, come on." And then it's like, you know, the Neidharts and the Davey boys were like, "Oh, okay, so he's fucking, I told you he was going to get mad." And it's like, that was just kind of like their dynamic. And like Davey, it's not that he didn't work hard, but yeah, he wasn't like that paranoid, like, what's that guy saying about me? I got to be better than him. I got to talk to Vince before him. Like, you know, and Davey wasn't that. He was just sort of like Craig said, like, just wrong place, wrong time. Just, all right, okay. And maybe, yeah, promoters looked at that and they're like, we'll use him and we'll push him, but I don't know if we want to put the big thing on him. I don't know if we do.
If he spent 10 minutes being the politicker that Sean was, or Triple H or Bret or anyone, like if he truly wanted to, like imagine what he could have done. Instead, he's like, "Okay, you go over this time and maybe
don't get mad, Bret. Calm down. I didn't know."
All right. When do I go? I'll go. Wait, you want me to lose in England to you, even though my sister who's dying? Okay, that's all right then. We'll do that.
Like, oh, that's terrible. That's terrible.
That's so true.
Sorry, and what I'm referring to is completely jumping ahead. I'm sorry, but Shawn Michaels beat him for the first time.
Yes.
No, you're totally fine.
And somehow Shawn Michaels apparently had convinced Vince, and it makes sense absolutely in the story and heat and that kind of thing. But there was an angle with his real life sister that he ended up losing
in England
and didn't find out the day of in England.
The European title.
Right.
That's how good Michaels was, like in convincing Vince to do everything his way.
And I'm trying to track this down because I was too busy looking at the Rumble where Michaels beat him as well.
Sorry.
In '95.
Yeah, and then go ahead and all the title defenses and the European, and the IC title, everything. Jess, you were right.
Yeah.
What a
Yes. I'm trying to tell you guys. I've been trying to tell you guys
for
for years that Michael's a fuck.
For decades.
He's a piece of shit.
It's true.
Like,
and I defended him. I would always go to Jess like, Jess, but if you had one DVD of your favorite restaurant at Desert Island, mine would be Shawn Michaels. So it's like, but I'm so sorry. Like years I've tried to. You're right.
He was a conniving cocksucker, and like
You're right.
when he came back, I am willing to believe that he did do his best work in 2002 and after when he came back. But before that, that son of a bitch. Like, it was such a shit stir. And Vince loved him. It's Vince's fault, too. Like, Vince didn't stop and put the wall up and go, now, I'm going to do what's right. No, Vince is just like, yeah, Brett he's a fucker. Yeah, Davey. Yeah, of course you're going to beat him in England. Anyway, next subject, because that's a given. Yeah, let's fuck your best friend Kevin Nash over. We'll do that, too. No problem. Like, everything he did. Like, and then finally in the end, when he got so drugged out and back hurt, he was just like, we're going with Austin. And no, we're not. No, we are. And that was, I'm leaving. Okay, goodbye. Like, that's the only thing that stopped Michaels was just fucking like someone Hogan-like that came about and just made more money than Shawn ever could. Like, finally over where Vince is like, I follow the fucking dollar. Like, that's what I do. So yeah, I know that we jumped way ahead, but yeah, like it's so true.
It's all good. Well, there's a lot of stuff here, and there is a lot of words, but it just amounts to the fact that you have the Allied powers in 94 to 95. We talk about that. Where they try to beat Owen Hart and Yokozuna for the tag titles there. It doesn't happen. He actually disbands.
We saw that, by the way, not to cut you off,
them.
Dave, but we were in the front row, Dave,
at
the Storm Stadium for a house show in 1995. And the tag title match on that card was Lex Luger and the Bulldog against Yoko and Owen. And we saw it in the front row live. And Craig brought the Union Jack British flag. And I'll never forget it because he's trying to get Davey's attention. And we're in the front row, and Davey just wouldn't lock eyes on our side. He just kept like looking everywhere else. And then Luger, of all people, like looked at Craig, super excited, like, oh, and he tapped,
hold it up.
Yeah, he tapped Davey Boy and told Craig to hold it up. And Davey looked, he's like, oh, thumbs up, big guy. Anyway, like,
could not care less.
Davey's not a dick, but like, yeah, it was just so funny. It was just one of those things where it was like Craig finally got his attention. And
I also think it was like 110 in like Elsinore, and those guys.
Well, and Yokozuna did the funniest shit. Like while the match was going on, he was on the apron, and Owen was in there getting beat up by the Bulldog. So Craig kept holding up the flag. And we kept trying to get Yoko's we're Yoko. We're yelling at him to point to Craig's flag, and then thinking that we would get a heel reaction, right? Finally, Yoko looked over because we were yelling his name so much, and he saw Craig hold the flag, and he shrugged his shoulders in such an I don't give a shit manner, and it made us all laugh really hard. Like he diffused us right away, which a great heel will do. Instead of overreacting, he looked at us and he's like, "Oh, I don't care," and like just went right back to watching Owen in the ring, and it was fantastic. Like it was great. Like, sorry, I didn't mean to stop the show. It's just that's a personal. We were in the front row. It was a very personal experience for all of us.
Yeah, so good. Smith found a replacement in Diesel when Luger no-shows the match for Men on a Mission, and Smith actually attacks Diesel, turns heel for the first time, helping Men on a Mission beat up Diesel, aligning with Jim Cornette's stable, and that's where we get to Cap Cornette from 95 to 97.
And may I say, in December of 95, Davey Boy rematched Brett for the WWF Championship, and Brett was champion. I want to go on record and say I like this match better than their SummerSlam match. Their match at In Your House 95 was fantastic. Like it was really
in your house in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Yes, it was really, really good. And ironically, it's funny. It's those two again, but was Davey on crack this time? I don't remember Brett saying that. Like, and they tore the house down. So Davey more than carried his shit here. And, Brett bled and like they took shit on the outside. And I remember watching this match going, this is better than their SummerSlam match. I think the SummerSlam match was so good because it was a lot of people and it was a great match. Don't get me wrong, but they were both faces and that was also unique. But like this here, it was a classic heel Davey Boy against Brett. And like they did so many great stuff here. I cannot stress. You should go back and watch this match. Like they were so good. Both of them were. And like it's important to go and watch this match because 95 was such a flux year for WWF and not good. But these two still like just went out there and like in your house, right? In December. And they're just like, yeah, we're going to tear the fucking house down. And they so did.
The British Bulldog has finished Bret Hart. I didn't think anyone could finish the Hitman, but Davey Boy Smith has done it.
What's he gonna do?
No.
What is he gonna do?
Davey Boy Smith pulling up what little bit of protective padding there is on the outside of the ring.
Gonna slam him on the concrete floor?
This is over, ice in. No. Bret trying to block it. And again. It goes.
And it was during a no blood policy, and I think the top of his hairline or something, he bleeds like a stuck pig. It's everywhere, Brett, but it's so good and it completely adds to it. And it's also every 10 seconds was a shot of Diana with concerned face, his wife again,
which was like SummerSlam.
Yeah, but I think it is. I think you're absolutely right. It was a better match. It was great.
It's really good. Like I really, their SummerSlam match again, also fantastic. What am I saying? But like this match, go back and watch it. It's worth it. Absolutely worth it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too because it's a notable incident because there was supposed to be no bleeding at that time, which is such a stupid rule anyway. But Hart's like, fuck it, I'm bleeding anyway. It's fucking whatever, you know. So Smith enters the 96 Royal Rumble where he made it to the final four, and he was eliminated by who once again? Your favorite asshole. There you go. In Your House 6, he lost to Yokozuna by disqualification after Vader interferes. At WrestleMania 12, he teamed with Vader and Owen to defeat Yokozuna, Ahmed Johnson, and Jake Roberts. That sounds like a horseshit match. At In Your House 7...
He was pinned by Shawn Michaels in that match.
And I know you talked about the 96 Rumble, but in the 95 Rumble, which is before the Brett and Bulldog rematch, guess who?
That's what we're talking about, where he was supposed to beat Shawn, and Shawn hits one fucking foot on the rope.
Yeah, that was 95, and then 96, right? I think. Sorry, I thought you said 96. I was like, did Shawn fucking really eliminate him 2 years in a row? Like that just.
No, he did.
Oh,
that's absolutely
that
true.
fuels my fire. Like Jesus Christ.
That's exactly what happened. No, he goes to the final two in 95, and Shawn gets that 1 foot, touching the floor.
Remember how loud we cheered, Craig? We thought Bulldog won
rolls back
you didn't see when they knocked Michaels over. You didn't see the 1 foot hit. You just saw Michaels go over because the hard camera's on the opposite. Craig, I think, jumped through my window at that point when he thought that Bulldog won, and then like they all of a sudden you see the replay and you see Shawn doing the whole 1 foot thing, and then he gets in because Davey's music was playing and he thought he won, and Michaels dumps him out and like was like, what the fuck? And like Craig said, totally continues to set the stage for the way it would go with those two. The way it would go.
Well, yep.
That sounds like a good idea. Okay. I guess it's fair.
I guess so.
What's gonna happen?
Shawn will win.
Is that you're gonna eliminate? Okay, 1 foot, and then you're gonna get all the
okay,
and then
But I mean, it's all good because Smith forms a tag team with Owen Hart, and they actually win the world title from the Smoking Guns. There you go, and they defended those titles against God, who cares? Vader and Mankind's a good one. Legion of Doom. I don't give a shit about Doug Furness and Phil LaFon, but okay, David.
I have no defense, but I'm just saying, don't speak ill of Doug Furness and Philip LaFon, please.
Okay, all right.
And
so in
honestly,
97,
this tag team was fantastic. Like, right, like we always talk about, that you hear wrestlers say, "Oh yeah, wrestling that guy's a night off." I can only imagine like the cool times that they had, and I say it because both wrestlers are dead, and Owen passed away super tragically. It was. I really fondly remember Bulldog and Owen together. It was really fucking. They were funny. And like you hear all the cool shit on the road about Owen would crack everybody up, and they both would and Davey was a prankster too. He was like Craig said, he was a kid at heart. That time, just even watching them on camera, they were so fun to watch, right? Like Owen and Davey was so cool. I'm glad they won the tag titles, and it was a real fun time where I remember the Bulldog fondly and going like, God, he's having fun, like he's having a lot of fun.
Yeah, agreed. And I think because they were screwing, the Bulldog over so badly, they actually created the title for him in 97, the WWF Euro Championship. Yeah. And he became the first to hold that title.
Michaels could win it, I'm convinced.
It could have happened, but he did win that in a tournament. He defeated his own tag team partner, Owen, in the finals on the 26th of February, which is pretty cool. And then in 97, Hart and Smith, they later joined forces with Bret Hart, Jim Neidhart, and Brian Pillman to have a new form of the Hart Foundation, which is a large heel faction which was made to feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin and other American wrestlers, right? This was probably the epitome of some of the greatest stuff in factions, some of the greatest work of Bret's career. And Davey was probably a part of that ride more or less. But isn't this where we get if you were going to put an enema into the country of the U.S., you'd stick the hose right over here in Pittsburgh. Yes. This is kind of where all this happens. This is phenomenal stuff by Bret. I don't want to overshadow, but this is the kind of stuff, like this heel faction was some of the best stuff you'd ever see from Bret because of this faction that was formed. And the British Bulldog was a big part of that.
Here we go. 1, 2. We got him. No. 1, 2. Shoulder to tie. He got him. It's finally over. Unbelievable. What a matchup. You're not going to find athleticism anywhere like this except in the World Wrestling Federation, and give credit to both competitors. What a match. What a tremendous match. Owen Hart very depressed, very distraught. He thought he had the match won with a victory roll, but the victory roll was countered by the British Bulldog. Nothing but a great pure wrestling counter, and the Bulldog is
the In Your House Canadian Stampede pay-per-view comes to mind. That ovation that the Hart Foundation gets, where the whole thing with Bret was working, where he's face outside of the U.S. but he's heel in the U.S. That In Your House Canadian Stampede in Canada was, they announced each member of the Hart Foundation one by one, and each one got a louder ovation like coming out, and like it was just Davey was a part of that, and he had the lineage he should have been, and it was really cool. Like that, another moment, go back and watch, even if you don't want to, the match was good too, but like go back and watch that match just for the entrance of the Hart Foundation. Just stellar shit.
Well, was it a 10-man tag? What was it?
I believe it was a 10-man. It was, yes. It was Brian, Owen, Davey, Bret, Anvil. Yes, it was a 10-man tag against LOD, Shamrock, Goldust, and Austin, I'm pretty sure.
So here's the interesting thing. Smith actually, the whole time he's holding this European title, and he actually starts a feud with Kim Shamrock, and he eventually loses it to Shawn Michaels, which is very interesting on a one night only. He was booked in the main event to defend that belt against Michaels, but Michaels convinces VKM that he should win it, as he would create buildup not only for his impending match against Bret Hart, but also for a rematch against Smith at the next British pay-per-view, which Davey Boy, he reluctantly agrees. And even though they gave Smith an ovation, this was a huge displeasure by British fans. They viciously booed Michaels, and they littered the ring with garbage. Probably not as bad as Bash at the Beach, right? But pretty bad. And this is the only time that Smith lost on a WWF card in the United Kingdom, according to these citations.
I'm just shocked that Michaels politicked. That's odd.
Oh, it never happens. Yeah.
I'm shocked right now. Learn something new every day. Fucker. God damn it.
Yeah. Well, it was his turn. It was his time.
Yeah, and Michaels had been shit on all before that, never got anything his way. And
I don't think he'd ever won a Rumble.
No, he never won a match, I don't think, until this point. This was his first victory, period, in WWF, Michaels. So I'm being too hard on Michaels. I just feel that God, no, fuck that guy. God damn it. Like
I think this match too, Bret was, I love how Bret makes it all about him, but I think is it Rick Rude and Triple H come out in the middle of this match to make it I guess the ending more palatable to like, well, he was outnumbered.
Right. Yeah.
But like Bret Hart and the rest of the Hart Foundation don't come out until like the very, very end, and that upset Bret. He's like, well, what were we doing? I was like, I don't know. It was just a story. Like just
yeah, I mean, if you thought about like that was stupid. We watched the awesome segment with Orton and Edge this last week on Raw. And it's like, some people were still saying the same thing. How come nobody ran out to rescue Edge? He's a legend. He's a treasure. And I'm like, because they couldn't do the storyline if somebody came out 2 seconds later and saved him. Like, you know what I mean? Like nothing would ever get done in wrestling if everyone always ran down and saved their friends. Like, so yeah, it's like you have to you do have to suspend disbelief. But no, from the beginning, this was fucking garbage, hot garbage. And it was just Michaels. Yeah. It was Michaels in the back, just politicking and being a shit. And doing what he always did. And like Craig said earlier, Davey sadly was always his fucking foil, like always. Because I really believe that he knew it would get to Bret. I really do believe that Michaels knew it would always just fucking kind of needle Bret a little bit, like all through those years.
Well, speaking of, politicking and all these other issues, we have to get into briefly the events of SummerSlam, right? Becoming infamous for the Montreal Screwjob, but on that same date and pay-per-view, Smith was a part of Team Canada alongside Jim Neidhart, Doug Furnace, Philip Lafone, defeating Team USA, Vader, Goldust, and Mark Murrow. Wow. And defeating Steve
Furnace and
Steve
Lafone
Blackman.
fucking want a match. Jesus, give him fucking their due.
Yeah, I'm sure he had a lot to do with it. Anyway,
Phil and Doug, as I like to call them.
Phil and Doug.
Who do you lose the titles to? Phil and Doug.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so bad. So we all know what happened here. You know, this is the infamous screw job. Vince manipulates the finish of
What's your
Bret Hart's
gimmick on
match.
this? On that? What's your gimmick? We're Phil and
Phil.
Doug.
We're neighbors, but like
I'm Phil and I'm Doug. And together we're Phil and Doug, and they say it together, like, and that's it. Like,
So the reason why this is so important, by the way, is that when Brett gets screwed, obviously Davey Boy follows him not soon after, right? So they both go to WCW for a couple of years, right? For Davey anyway. He rejoins in late '97. He begins a feud with Mongo McMichael.
that's a trade up. I'm so glad he went to WCW.
Oh my god! From the
Part of the hottest feud in wrestling, and then he goes to Mongo.
Yeah. Hey, the boy had a mouth on him, didn't he? I'll tell you that.
He really did.
Mongo knew how to work a microphone. That's for sure.
all he knew how to work.
But Smith, Smith suffered a knee injury in April '98, and that sidelined him for a month. And then he suffered another much more serious injury on the 13th of September '98, with a match with Neidhart against the Dancing Fools, Disco Inferno and Alex Wright.
David, goddamn it, stop for a minute.
I try to get through it. I just can't.
Can you say that last sentence again for me, please?
Okay, are you ready? Okay. He suffered a much more serious injury on the 13th of September in 1998 at Fall Brawl during his match with Jim the Anvil Neidhart against the Dancing Fools, Disco Inferno, and Alex Wright.
Like he was not even a year before he was part of the hottest wrestling angle, right? And we talked about all these classic matches with Brett and the way he was used as like an overseas attraction, all that. And he suffers pretty much could very well be that it's not all of this injury. It was other things that he was doing behind the scenes, but this is the dominoes that started his career to fall against the Dancing Fools. Thank you.
But
thank you, WCW. Thank you,
according
WCW, for blindly purchasing names just to fuck Vince over. I mean, you get God, like, oh man.
Don't forget the ding dongs, but don't
I hate to see that. Like, I know wrestlers when they get old, sometimes they dip off, and there's so many sad stories. But fuck, like Davey.
This is even sadder though when you think about how this happened, how this injury happens to him. According to the citations here, he twice lands awkwardly on a trapdoor that had been set up
for that
underneath the canvas to enable the Warrior to make an entrance.
Which is right in the middle of the ring, and there are two rings because it's Fall Brawl, because there's a War Games in it.
But you couldn't use the other fucking ring, right?
And they didn't tell anybody about the trapdoor because it was a super secret.
Yeah.
So he falls twice directly.
And instead of putting all the singles matches before the War Games on the other fucking ring where there was no trapdoor, they put him on the ring with the trapdoor. Again, thank you, WCW, for just being a fucking...
I mean, and this is, I know we're joking about it, but this is pretty serious. This results in a spinal infection that nearly paralyzes him, and it hospitalizes Smith for 6 months. And then, by the way, you know how people at WCW like to fire you via FedEx? Smith is no exception to that. He gets that while he's recuperating, letting him know that his WCW contract had been terminated. Following this serious back injury, he battled an addiction to morphine and painkilling drugs, which is just too common of a tale, right? As far as that goes.
And apparently he had to leave the hospital room after 6 months because Shawn Michaels wanted it.
Oh no! God damn it!
Or Shawn wanted to come in and pin him while he was like just on the stretcher. And so they had to do that. They had to
God.
Yes,
that is true. That Dave, I don't know if they didn't put that on Wikipedia, which is odd.
Is that in the notes, Dave?
Yeah,
that's not in the citations. We'll have to go back and review. Yeah.
Okay.
and you know what's even crazier? I can't even imagine. But after all this, Smith actually returns back to the WWF for his third return in 1999. Following the death of Owen, which is just a horrible, tragic accident. It's in our archives, by the way. Jess gets very emotional about that. I think we all do, but it's in there. And keeping up with the Attitude Era, Smith can't wrestle in his flag pants anymore. He's got to wrestle in jeans apparently.
Which is between your legs. All I ask can somebody come down and get him a shot?
So a challenge has been issued by the big boss man. Any dog lovers back there? I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be too eager to take that challenge. Well, somebody has taken... Wait a minute. What? Is it Key? It is! The British Bulldog is back! King, this must be the last guy the boss man was expecting. I can't believe it's the last man I expected. I thought he was in a hospital bed somewhere. We knew the Bulldog was coming back to the World Wrestling Federation, but we didn't know it would be this soon. The Bulldog, a former tag team champion, European champion.
Okay, wait. I know that we say it's stupid because that's where we're used to him, but this was in '99. This was the full-on Attitude Era. WWF has overtaken WCW at this point, and they're drumming them in the ratings in '99.
And
I think that
some people become legends walking out in
atmosphere
jean
of
shorts,
wrestling
and
back
some
then,
people look
and
like
Davey
they're
walks down with
having a cold one after doing their long
English tights on, and dun, 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 dun. I don't think that would have fit. I'm being honest. Like I'm not saying I like what they did with him. They put him in blue jeans and he came down to like dogs barking.
They put him in the Hardcore Championship story.
Yeah, I'm not saying I like what they did with him, but I don't see him coming back in the traditional Bulldog look here. It just wasn't that era anymore. He had to change it up. You know, this was an era where guys used their real names. You know what I mean? Like, you know, WCW, it was their real first and last name. So I get what you're saying, Dave, but I don't know. I can't see him coming back with the Union flag on his tights.
I don't know.
Yeah. I'm really glad that he went back to WWF here because he did look in much better shape. And if you go back and look at the 97, 98 Davey Boy in WCW, he looked really bloated and sad. It was hard to watch him. And you can only speculate what exactly he was doing in his private time, but he wasn't very healthy, I don't believe, at this point. And he was injured a lot to his
What's funny is he still pulls down a Hardcore Championship, a European Championship here. No.
15. Okay, just making sure. I was making sure I had to read ahead because you never know.
No. I'm just saying, like, it's just a lot of stuff going on. But later on in his career, he basically wrestles. He actually wrestles in 3 tag team matches, even with his son Harry Smith, who we've seen, in the Independents now was just fucking massive, right? And that's kind of where it ends in 2002, right?
Yeah, he left WWF. It didn't really work out there in that sense, but I'm glad he got to kind of semi-finish it off, and he looked clean in there, and he looked semi-healthy, and I'm not trying to judge him at this point. He had a long career. When did you say he started when he was 15?
78.
I think about, we're talking about 99 when he wrapped it up, and then everything that happened with his demons and everything in between. What a long fucking run, or long painful run at times. Owen dies, Brett gets screwed, and vice versa. Brett gets screwed, then Owen dies, and it's just kind of like, God, like, he did go through a lot. That was his family to a certain extent, outside and inside of the ring, and like, what a long stretch. You look at that now and you're just like, fuck, like, I'm glad he could at least look decent in 99 and 2000 when he did that run. But yeah, like Dave said, in 2002, he at least showed up on the indies and wrestled with his son, and he was training for a comeback at that point. He wanted to go back to WWF at that point, who had bought WCW already in 2002. So he was looking for a comeback already.
Yeah. The fact that the weekend before he died, that kind of touched me. He got to do it with his son. I mean, that's just heartbreaking. 25-year career, and he passed at 39, for God's sake.
39.
I mean, that's just unbelievable. But he was a monster. He was a big guy, but you go and watch. We used to make fun of his matches, but you'd watch him with Regal, and he still could do all those technical, British, European kind of style. He could lift you up in a vertical suplex that took 6 minutes. He could go toe to toe with Michaels. He was amazing. He was great. He never got to that next level, but he was a worker, and he was old school, and I loved watching him. He was a huge part of our life of growing up watching wrestling through the 80s, 90s, and aughts, or beginning of the aughts. So
he was a massive part of our childhood. Really, he was,
for sure.
So to get that personal portion in, and Smith and his wife Diana had 2 children, Harry and Georgia. In early 2000, Diana divorced him, and Smith was given shared custody. At that time, he entered a drug rehabilitation clinic at the behest of Vince McMahon, who always paid for it, paid for a lot of guys' rehab, right? Because he had problems with prescription painkillers and morphine since his back injury that he had suffered in WCW, and he was released from the company after he kind of take care of that. So Smith died on the 18th of May in 2002 after suffering a heart attack while on holiday in Invermore, British Columbia, with his girlfriend, who was Bruce Hart's estranged wife, Andrea Redding. An autopsy revealed past anabolic steroid use may have played a part in his death, but there's no certain reason that was found.
Because nobody knew anything about growth hormones. They wreaked havoc on you. I mean, we saw that string where Guerrero dies, and Perfect, I really believe Perfect and Rude died from that too. And
that's what Bruce Hart claims too. He said Davey paid the price with steroid cocktails and human growth hormones. 2 funeral services were held, one by Andrea and the other by the Hart family. Bret Hart actually attended.
God, the Hart family is such a mess for a while. It's so head spinning to think about their.
Well, it's the Von Erich stuff too. It's almost like it's cursed.
Well, just like, and then him, getting with Bruce's wife later, and I think she was long divorced from Bruce, but still, like, God, what a terrible thing he was involved in towards the end, right? Whether it was drugs or just trying to rehab from injuries and spinal infections, and I don't know, I think we summed it up earlier in the episode where it was like he was a follower, and he just kind of flowed. And we were lucky to see his signs of brilliance, when he would do the classic matches with Brett. And he had a lot of other great matches with Vader, especially, man. Vader in 93, him and Davey, like, every time they wrestled was awesome. Like, the crowd was so into it. And it's just, he gave us a lot of good stuff with Owen. And, he kind of ebb and flowed, right? Like, he was the kid, like Craig said. He was the guy who was just like, oh, whatever you want. But then we would get lucky and we would watch him in there, and we would watch the greatness of him and how good he was. And, he really was like, and I think Craig or Dave, you said it earlier in the episode. I think Craig did, imagine if he really just was that kind of locker room alpha male or that paranoid guy and did it. He would have at least stole 1 world title.
Oh yeah. Like, if he had voiced his opinion on any
I
occasion,
can't believe we're covering him and we're saying he never won a world championship. That's crazy.
That's insane.
Not one WCW title. Like, come on. Like, I don't know. It's just crazy.
Well, let's go down the list, shall we? So All Japan Pro Wrestling. He actually wins 2 battle royals there. He's the world's strongest tag determination league fighting spirit award. I love those kind of awards that All Japan gives out. He's an IWA heavyweight champion. He has a match of the year by PWI with Bret Hart at SummerSlam. He's ranked top 15 of the top 500 wrestlers in PWI 93, 53 of 500 in 2003. He's ranked 5 and 84 of the top 100 tag teams of the PWI years with Dynamite Kid and Owen Hart. Separate tag teams. Stampede, he's an international tag team championship holder with Bruce Hart. He's a Commonwealth mid heavyweight champion. He's an international tag team champion twice with Dynamite Kid. He's a North American heavyweight championship twice. He's a mid heavyweight championship holder. Wrestling Hall of Fame in 95 for Stampede. In the WWF, he's a 1-time Intercontinental Champion, 2-time Euro Champion, 2-time Hardcore Champion. Tag team titles twice with Dynamite Kid and with Owen Hart separately. He wins a Battle Royal in Albert Hall. He wins a Euro Championship tournament. He wins a WWF Tag Team Championship tournament with Owen in 97. He wins the WWA Intercontinental Championship. It just goes on and on, right? So he's in the Canadian Wrestling Hall of Fame individually and with the Hart family as well. And the reason why we're talking about this is probably in the next 3 months he will be a WWE
I hope so.
Hall of Famer.
His daughter has a big presence on social media now, and she's really pushing # induct Davey into WWE. I hope we see him go in this year.
It's long overdue.
I hope so. It is long overdue. And I don't shit on Vince for not putting people in, because you got to wait. Vince runs, the Hall of Fame now. Like, it's an institution. You don't want to. You want people for the future, you know, like, and I think he's waited with Davey on purpose because there's no reason why Davey's not in at this point, right? Hillbilly Jim's in, and sorry, God bless Hillbilly Jim, and I'm sure he wrestled with it hard, but Davey Boy Smith, like, come on.
I know.
You got other people in there like Beware and
Coco's in it.
Yeah, Beware and Nikolai, and I'm not shitting on them. They worked just as hard and they toured, and I get it. But like, I mean, Davey,
Phil and Doug.
Yeah. Bill and Doug. Shawn Michaels at least 19 times, I'm sure, has been inducted in the Hall of Fame with DX or whatever. Like, give Davey just one.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Hillbilly Jim.
Yeah, put Davey in as the British Bulldogs with Dynamite. That's fine, right? Like, or singles. But I mean, that's fine. You want to put him in as, you know, part of the tag team? That's fine too. Give him something for shit's sake. Like, come on, man.
Yeah,
like,
it's time.
Drew, isn't Drew
You're
Carey?
not gonna
Donald Trump's in there. Come on.
Drew Carey.
Yeah, Donald Trump's in there. Like, give me a break. Put the man in there.
I mean, his son looks. And real quick, I know we're going long, but like, I don't remember Harry Jr. wrestling with what's Natalia's husband, Tyson Kidd, and I don't remember that phase of them in. But why is Harry Jr. never worked out?
Yeah, they were in there. They
WWE?
won the tag titles briefly in WWF, and they were even part of that gimmick where Brett came back and fought Vince at a WrestleMania, and they came down to help Brett win. I don't know. I'm assuming that Smith Jr. is pretty opinionated. I think I'm gathering that from reading, not in a negative way. He's what his dad should have been, and I don't mean that. I mean that as respect, total respect.
That's a great point.
I think
what a fantastic point that is.
I think he's just like, no, I need, like, he went to New Japan. He wanted to learn there. That was his goals, I think. And he might be following his dad's footsteps, going, my dad was in New Japan. My dad went everywhere to learn and to put a craft together. And then, you know, he became, you know, who he was. You know, I don't think Smith Jr. started as young as Davey, but I mean, I think that's what his goal is. And I think he doesn't mind saying, I don't need this place. I'm glad I got to stop in WWE early, but I don't need this shit. Cause I think he saw what it was. And he was like, I don't want to be part of this. This is not the Smith family legacy. I'll be elsewhere. And maybe years down the line, I'll be back. Maybe.
Seems like he's doing fine too, by the way.
Yeah.
He'll be all right.
I think he's doing his dad. I think he's doing his dad proud, and I'm not shitting on Davey Boy by saying, oh, you know, Junior. But you always say, you know, when you have a son, for people who have a son, I want that person to be better than me. Well, in the best way possible, he is being better than Davey, and I think he will be, and that's what you hope for.
Yeah, when you think about Davey's situation, Davey was following a footprint that didn't exist, right? They're going into this whole other world of wrestling that didn't exist at all. And you can learn from that. And I think his son has learned from that just based on one blueprint. And that's hard to do. A lot of people will repeat those mistakes, and I don't think he has. So it's pretty phenomenal. So Davey Boy.
Odds on Shawn Michaels inducting Davey Boy Smith in the Hall of Fame.
Good God. It'll be fucking Brett.
That's not funny. That's not funny at all. I was gonna say too, like Shawn Michaels Jr. is gonna pick Davey Boy Smith.
Oh no!
Davey Boy Smith Jr. finally wins the world title, and then he cashes in. Shawn Jr. cashes in the Money in the Bank and beats him right away.
That's so funny.
What? I don't know, Vin. I don't know, Hunter. Maybe my time. I should probably go over. What do you think?
Okay. It's gonna be Hunter at that
Jr.
time. That's true. You'll be just like your dad, undercutting the Smiths.
Yep. Awesome. All right.
Okay, I'm going out there with my briefcase.
I'm going over.
Jesus.
So before, I know we ran really long, but since this kind of episode sort of, you know, was in honor of you, Craig, in the sense of doing this with us, and you were from England, and, you know, Davey meant a lot to you. Have the final word, please, before Dave signs us out about Davey's career.
Yeah.
I'm talking into a microphone now, and behind me is a unwrapped package of Davey Boy Smith's WWE figure and a British toll booth. So I've got a little like memorial of my British stuff, and he's certainly on there. And we all had our favorites growing up, and we all had the ones we root for, and we all picked our kind of our characters, our monikers, our music when we used to beat the heck out of each other, and we in living rooms across our town and our high school together. And we all had our favorites and our feuds, and when we used to talk to death about who's the greatest wrestler, who's the worst, and Bulldog was mine. So he was my little like lasting kind of legacy of England, even when I was here, and I'm proud American now, but I always loved Davey Boy. So, and even though he never kind of won the big one. I mean, at least he was always kind of part of the action, and he fit into anything anyone ever asked him to do, whether it was 80,000 people, whether it was main eventing in your houses, or whether it was just being a critical part of a faction, or part of, during the lean years, a core part of 6 guys that could always be counted on every night to main event Raw or main event a pay-per-view or whatever Vince needed. So he did it all, and workmanlike, and big kid. So that's Davey Boy.
Wrap it up nicely, man. That's the legacy of the British Bulldog. Hit us up on Instagram at O.W.P 2019. Click on Linktree. You can find us on several platforms, including Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. This is Dave, Jess, and Craig with the O.W.P signing off, guys. Have a good one.